Welcome to Module 3, which deals with the basic facts about slips, trips and falls, and why it is so important to understand and control them. It will then follow this by covering working at height. Slips, trips and falls can occur on one level or, potentially more dangerously, from height. Of course, when you're doing a risk assessment, you have to indicate whether the potential hazard is a slip, a trip or a fall. People write down STF, slips, trips and falls. This is wrong. They should be more precise. For example, an extension cable across a scaffolding walkway isn't an STF hazard, it's a trip hazard. Spilt liquid on a hard floor is a slip hazard. A hazard associated with working at height or somewhere that a worker could fall from should be noted as just that, a fall hazard. However, if someone working at height tripped over a toolbox and fell, then that should be entered into the log as a trip and a fall, complete with a full explanation of the incident. Slips and trips are, in the main, caused by poor housekeeping on the site. You should always keep the site clean and tidy. If you see items on the ground where someone could trip over them, you should remove them or arrange for them to be removed so that the situation is made safe immediately. Controls put in place to reduce slip and trip hazards should be proportional to the injuries and losses they can cause. Most of the time, simple solutions can eliminate most of the hazards. However, personal responsibility and employee engagement are always essential if solutions are to be effective. Here are some of the main trip hazards. Uneven surfaces. These risks can be reduced by providing designated walkways with good conditions underfoot. All walkways should be well lit, and in addition, slopes and stairs should have handrails. Obstacles. The chance of obstacles tipping over can be dramatically reduced by ensuring everyone follows good housekeeping practices. Keeping their work areas tidy and making sure waste is put in designated areas. Trailing cables. Cordless tools should be used where possible. If this can't be done, cables should be run at high levels. If a cable has to cross a walkway, use a cable guard. Have a positive attitude to health and safety, such as see it, sort it, clean up as you go, store things properly after use, and deal with hazards immediately. Slip hazards. Some of the most common slip hazards include leaks, spills, and splashes of liquid, particularly in the vicinity of wet processes. Spillages should be cleaned up straight away with a cleaning regime appropriate to the surface and contaminant. If a surface is slick with mud, it should be treated with stone, and if it is slippery with ice, it should be cleared and treated with salt or grit. Any slippery areas should be signposted. Footwear that provides a secure grip should always be worn. You should contact your manager to make sure your footwear is correct, and if PPE footwear is supplied, it must be free of charge. Other slip hazards include unsuitable matting, sloping surfaces, wet floors following cleaning, dust and other dry contaminants, leaking roofs, and condensation from pipework. Apart from slips, trips and falls, the results of poor housekeeping can include falling objects caused by poorly placed tools on scaffolding or materials left unsecured on the roof of vehicles, contamination from poor disposal of site waste, and a lack of site hygiene leading to infestation problems such as rats. Poor housekeeping can also lead to an increased fire risk and blocked escape routes. Please click Next to continue. Now we'll look at the hazards and the controls available to reduce the risk of falls when working at height. Working at height is defined as work above, at or below ground level, where a person could be injured if they fall. Examples of workplaces at height include alongside trenches, on stages or scaffold platforms, on roofs, on cherry pickers and scissor lifts, and up ladders. It is quite common for employees in the construction industry to, at times, be asked to work at height. This could be a part of their regular job or to carry out specific one-off tasks. Always remember to avoid working at height where it is reasonably practical. Do as much work as possible from the ground. These regulations apply to all work at height, where there is a possibility that a fall could cause injury. They place duties on employers along with anyone who controls any work at height activity. This could include facilities managers or building owners who may contract others to work at height. As part of the regulations, the employer must ensure all work at height is appropriately planned and organised. The competence of all employees that work at height. Appropriate risk assessment for all work at height is carried out. That appropriate equipment is provided and used. That any risks associated with working on or near fragile surfaces are suitably managed. That equipment used for work at height is appropriately inspected and maintained. Other points to consider include: remove the need for the task. If you have to provide permanent access, such as a mobile scissor lift, you could install security gates or security personnel and issue working at height permits to the correct persons. If you have to provide appropriate temporary access, such as a ladder, this should be backed up with a safe system of work, a method statement, and a risk assessment, which should be understood and followed. Using temporary access will also need a permit to work. Please click Next to continue. As we said earlier, always consider measures that protect everyone at risk, collective protection, before measures that only protect the individual, personal protection. Examples of collective protection include permanent or temporary guardrails, scissor lifts, and tower scaffolds. An example of personal protection is putting on a safety harness correctly and connecting it with a lanyard to a suitable anchor point. Ladders are a common tool that you will come across when working on construction sites. To ensure their safe use, please take into account these do's and don'ts of working with ladders. Do as much of the work as possible from ground level. Conduct a risk assessment before starting work. This should include assessing the competence of the person who will do the work. Ensure workers can safely reach where they work at height. Ensure equipment is suitable, stable, strong, well-maintained, and regularly inspected. Consider risks associated with working on or near fragile surfaces. Protect all employees and site visitors from falling objects. Consider appropriate emergency procedures for if something goes wrong. Place the ladder on stable, level ground. Check if you need fall protection. Keep 3 points of contact when working on ladders. And remember, when using a ladder to get to another level, secure and extend it at least 3 feet above the landing point. Don't overload ladders. Consider the equipment or materials workers are carrying before working at height. Check the pictogram or label on the ladder for information. Overreach on ladders or step ladders. Rest ladders against weak upper surfaces, such as window glass or gutters. Use ladders or step ladders for strenuous or long-term tasks. Only use them for light work that can be completed in 30 minutes or less. Let anyone who is not competent work at height. Place ladders near doorways, walkways, or traffic. Please click Next to continue. Working at height can also mean undertaking tasks from a working platform. The work at height regulations redefine the meaning of working platforms so that it now covers almost any surface from which work can be carried out. For example, roofs, floors next to holes or trenches, platforms on scaffolding, mobile elevating work platforms such as cherry pickers and scissor lifts, or the treads of a stepladder. If you need to move something from one part of a wall to another, a scaffold tower can give you the flexibility you need. They provide a stable surface for two people working at height. The type of scaffold tower selected must be suitable for the work and erected and dismantled by trained personnel. Scaffold tower provision and use must be properly managed and include rigorous inspection arrangements. People using scaffold towers should be trained in the potential dangers and precautions required. Numerous people are injured every year when they fall from scaffold towers or when the tower overturns. Other risks include collapse, falling objects, and contact with overhead obstructions or electrical cables. Beyond these hazards, other causes of incident include dangerous methods of erection and dismantling, where a safe system of work is not being followed. Defects in the erected scaffold, where the tower structure is assembled incorrectly, or where a platform guardrail is missing. Misuse of the scaffold. This could be caused by someone attempting to work on a tower while it is being moved. To maintain tower stability, you must ensure the tower is resting on firm, level ground, with the locked casters or base plates properly supported. Never use bricks or building blocks to take the weight of any part of the tower. Stabilizers or outriggers are installed when required by the instruction manual, and a tower is never erected to a height above the manufacturer's recommendations. Never use a tower in extreme weather conditions such as strong winds as a support for other access equipment such as ladders, with broken or missing parts or with inappropriate components. When moving a tower, you should always reduce the height to a maximum of 4 meters. Check that there aren't any power lines or other overhead obstructions. Check that the ground is firm and level. And push or pull the tower from the base only, using manual effort. Never try to move a tower whilst people or materials are on it. The most significant hazards with mobile elevating work platforms, MEWPs, relate to operation of the machine or occur whilst it is in use, rather than from their movement around a site. Most fatal and serious injuries involving MEWPs arise from entrapment. The operator can become trapped between part of the basket and a fixed structure. This can happen when maneuvering in confined overhead areas. Overturning. The elevated platform may overturn if used in extreme weather conditions or on uneven ground. This can lead to the operator being thrown from the basket. Falling. It is possible for an operator to fall from the basket whilst working. And collision. The vehicle could collide with people on site, overhead cables, or other vehicles. There is also a risk of being crushed and problems caused by technical issues with the machine, equipment failure, or unauthorized use. These hazards should be identified as part of the risk assessment process and effective control measures put in place. It is vital that the right platform is selected based on the job to be undertaken and the site it is to be used on. There should be a plan in place for rescuing someone from an MEWP if an emergency occurs. This plan should be practiced, and people on the ground should know what to do, including how to control the machine from the ground. There are a number of precautions that can be taken to reduce the risk from MEWP hazards. These include fall prevention. If the risk is low, and it is not reasonably practicable to take precautions, then just training and instruction will be sufficient. Where the fall height is 2 meters or more, HSE inspectors will always expect action to be taken to prevent falls. Confined overhead working. Operators must be briefed on the dangers and the safe system of work to be followed. There may be overhead structures against which an operator could be trapped, then pushed onto the MEWP controls. In this case, consider using an MEWP with protected controls. Ensuring that the platform is kept tidy reduces the risk that the operator could trip or lose their balance whilst working in the basket. And the platform should only be used on firm and level ground, away from trenches or holes, which can cause a machine to overturn. If this is not possible, then appropriate strong temporary covers should be used. MEWPs that feature outriggers must have these extended and chocked before the platform is raised. Further spreader plates should be used where necessary. The work at height regulations require that, for construction work, handrails have to have a minimum height of 950 mm, and that any gap between the top rail and any intermediate rail should not exceed 470 mm. The regulations also require toe boards have a minimum height of 100 mm. If there is still a risk of people falling from the platform, a harness with a short work restraint lanyard must be used. This should be secured to a suitable anchorage point within the basket. Barriers should be placed around the platform so that falling tools or objects do not strike people below. High winds make platforms unstable. Set a maximum wind speed for operation. Storms and snowfalls can also damage platforms. Inspect the platform before use after severe weather. If the platform is being used to install materials, check the weight and dimensions of the materials and assess any manual handling activities and load distribution issues. It may be the case that you need additional lifting equipment, such as a crane, to transport materials into position before work can proceed. Never operate an MEWP close to overhead cables or other dangerous machinery. Please click Next to continue.